Good morning, everyone. This week we studied a portion of Chayei Sarah, and we will be studying from selections of Likutei Sichos, the first discussion on Chayei Sarah. We read about the end of life of Sarah. We also read about the end of life of Abraham. We read about the marriage of Yitzchak to Rivka in this week's Torah portion, but the name of the portion is Chayei Sarah, the life of Sarah. And she's the one mentioned right at the beginning of this week's Torah portion. The Midrash associates the verse, and Sarah's life was 127 years, with the quote, God knows the days of the perfect ones, and explains, just as they, the righteous, are perfect, mimim, so too their years are perfect. The Midrash continues by citing Sarah as an example of one whose years were complete. There was nothing lacking in the years which she was allotted. The Midrash says that from Sarah we learn that righteous men whose life are filled with righteousness activities, God also filled up the years, that the years of their life are perfect. In other words, their behavior also dictates the years of their life. The question arises, both before and after Sarah, there were many righteous men and women whose years were perfect. Why is Sarah chosen as the paradigm? Why Sarah is the example of life that are filled with righteous men whose deeds are full of good? A simple answer is that since other righteous men and women continuously fulfilled the charge, you shall serve God your Lord, they were rewarded with the fulfillment of the promise stated immediately thereafter in the Torah, I will fill and span the span of your days. That is, they were granted a long and full life. It is a self-understood that such a person's years are perfect. By contrast, having a certain number of years taken from the lifetime of a righteous man for an incidental reason would appear to indicate that the person was not given the full measure of life for which he was destined. Nevertheless, even though Sarah passed away before her time because of an external factor, her soul expired when she was told of the binding of Yitzchak, but her years were perfect. Since this is a unique phenomenon, her example is cited to illustrate this concept. Did you understand?
No, absolutely.
No. The Rebbe says the simple answer is simply, usually a righteous man, God will grant them the full years of their life. And therefore you can say their deeds are perfect, so their years are perfect. Sarah died in an abrupt way, seemingly earlier than her time. She did not die at the time allotted her, but earlier because of the binding of Yitzchak. Right after she heard that he was off the altar, she got a shock and she got a heart attack and she died. You might think that their life is not filled. It's not full to capacity because ordinarily she should have lived much longer. Therefore, the Midrash brings Sarah as an example that her life was perfect, meaning God made a miracle, even though naturally you say she should have had many more years. The fact that she lived 127 years is because it was full of good deeds, and each day was full exactly to the capacity she could have, and there was nothing left to live life for any further than
Then
that.
how can you say she should have lived longer?
That's the miracle that God makes, and therefore that's the symbol chosen from all our other systems.
It says Abraham too, that he took 5 years away from.
We will talk about Abraham soon, okay? But Sarah was first. Therefore, Sarah is quoted as an example. Yes.
Let's tell me that she's supposed to live as long as 175 years.
Oh.
Before they take it, and I don't even aware what the comment was. But that's something.
All right, makes sense. So therefore, she's in a unique way. In other words, the Midrash says righteous men whose deeds are perfect, their years are perfect as well. There are many righteous men who had perfect years. Sarah is an example of that case because here she did not have the full amount of years allotted her, and yet the years that she lived on earth were perfect. And that's unique to Sarah.
Okay.
And Ali is asking that Abraham also is a righteous man who had perfect years, and he lived only 175 years. So soon probably we'll be touching upon it.
They took
But
away 5 years.
the answer I would have, the simple one is Sarah came before Abraham, therefore she was the first example.
But I don't understand either example.
Why?
I thought the concept was that you live, when you're born, your soul is given X number of time, and that's when you're gonna die, period, end of story.
And
How does it get adjusted?
when God adjusts the years, she died abruptly, meaning God needed to adjust the years, take away a few years from her life. Yet God will make sure that retroactively all of her years were perfect, and she have achieved completely her mission in those years.
But on a more simple basis, how can you say that they took away some of the years if from the beginning you're determined when you're gonna die?
God can change.
Then you're not determined when you're gonna die when you're born. If God can change it, God does change it, then it's, what are we saying? I don't understand the concept.
This is a broad question that can be asked about every single event in our life, and especially in history. For example,
Okay, I know what you're saying.
Adam's sin,
Yeah.
and God changed his mind. Noah's generation, God destroyed the universe. I don't understand. If God did not like them, he should have not created them to begin with.
That's not what I'm asking.
So it's a very similar question.
Yes.
It's a very similar question. You're asking that the outcome of the results that we human beings have, so to say, a role in, affected God's desire at the beginning, at the outset. How is it possible? That's what you're asking. I'm here to tell you this is a phenomena that's a part of and parcel of Judaism.
Then I don't know how you can say.
Okay, the bottom line is actually you can't understand that.
Okay.
All I'm going to say, it doesn't make sense to us because our mindset does not understand. God created a person, and that person chose to have a perfect life. And therefore, God made sure that her years would be perfect. She will have the exact amount of years she deserved because she was perfect in her deeds. And yet we read that her life ended shorter. Comes and says, the years that she was allotted was the perfect amount of years. Ali comes and it's contradict when the original plan was. Well, that's the way God does it. You cannot ask from the end to the beginning. That's the way God can do it. We cannot. Once you set the goal, once you shoot an arrow and the arrow is 150 yards distant, you cannot say it stops at 70 and that was the perfect distance. It's not that by us. When you let the arrow off your hands, the arrow will go based on the strength that you gave it, the energy you infused it with. By God, it works the other way around.
It makes no sense to me that you can make a statement that says when you're born, you have a specified amount of time and you're going to die in a specified amount of time. Obviously, that's not true.
First, that can be the case with God. Number two, as we see also with Abraham. The second is God does not tell you how many years. All he said is she should have lived longer, but it ended up shorter and every day of her life was perfect.
I have no problem with the perfect.
Okay.
I have a problem with it.
Nevertheless, since the lesson taught by the Torah are extremely precise, it is unlikely that this is the only reason of the Midrash associates this idea with Sarah. Indeed, the reason stated above, that her days were full despite the fact that she died before her time, does not contribute anything to our understanding of this association. On the contrary, the association made by the Midrash implies that the concept of complete years shares more of a connection with Sarah than with other righteous people. The Rebbe says that this answer is a simple answer, but when you concentrate on it, it's quite the opposite. If it's the way it's worked with Sarah, you can apply it only to Sarah. God gave her exactly what years she needed to have a perfect life. Everybody else who lived there a lot of times that was destined before, how do you know that it was perfect? So therefore, it's not an example for all of them. It's a unique situation. Another question arises. What is the reason the righteous are described as perfect? It could not be to indicate that they are perfect in their observance of the 613 mitzvot, for this can be inferred by the very word righteous. This understanding applies even according to the simple meaning of the term. How much more so is it true when taking into consideration the meaning of the term righteous as described in Tanya. Says Rabbi, if you call somebody a righteous man, it means that all their deeds were perfect. So we need to understand, what do you mean that their years are full? By using the term perfect, the Midrash appears to be pointing to an additional attribute that the righteous possesses. Aside from their observance of mitzvot, and they are perfect, what is the quality of perfection? Says Rabbi, being righteous is someone who's fulfilling every day of their life with mitzvot, so their life are filled with good. What do you mean their years are perfect? A further point, when the Torah associates two concepts, the implication is that the connection between the two is not merely a chance association, but that the two concepts share an intrinsic connection, or that one concept leads to another. So when the Midrash says, just as they are perfect, so too their years are perfect, it is hinting that the perfection of the righteous shares an inner connection with or leads to the perfection of their years. There must be a connection between perfect years versus perfect deeds. Either one leads to the other or one is connected with the other. This is difficult to understand. On the surface, the very fact that these individuals are righteous and have carried out their divine service in observance of mitzvot is sufficient reason for the days to be perfect. As stated above, the promise to fill the span of your days is granted as a reward for the continuous divine service. It is thus necessary to understand why the Midrash associates the perfection of a righteous person's years specifically with the perfection of the righteous person himself. The rabbi says, what's the connection between their years are perfect versus their deeds are perfect? There is something that must be connected, or they lead to one lead to the other. The above questions can be resolved by referring to the comments of the Midrash and another verse in this week's Torah portion. And the verse, Avraham zaken ba bayamim. Avraham was old, advanced in years. The Midrash comments, there are men who are old but are not advanced in years, and others who are advanced in years but are not old. The Torah says that Abraham was old, advanced in years. These are two separate terminologies, and some people would have one or the other. In Abraham's instance, his age paralleled his advancement in years, and his advancements in years paralleled his age. There are commentaries to the Midrash who interpret its words simply. There are times when a person appears elderly, although he is not advanced in years. For example, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah looked like a seasoned sage, despite the fact that he was only 18. Anybody is familiar with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah? He was appointed leader of the Jewish people because he was a great descendant of Ezra, of Hillel, of Rabban Gamliel. But he was 18. He came home. He said to his wife, they told me to be the leader. But she said, so what's the problem? He said, I look like a young man. She said, don't worry. No, the wife says to him, the wife says, how is it possible you're taking it? You look like a young man. These are elder people. And overnight, his white turned white. His beard turned white. And he became a great sage. I look like a 7 years old. It's in the Agada. What do you mean he looked like a 7 years old? He was 18, but he looked like a 70 years old. So these are people who are old, but not advanced in days, because they only had 18 years of experience. And conversely, there are men who are advanced in years, but who appears much younger. In Abraham's instance, his appearance matched his a chronological age. Some people are very old, but they look very young. They always have black beard. And therefore, Abraham, the Torah tells us, that's a simple answer. Abraham was old, coming in his days, meaning that his advancement in his age is parallel or is equal to his age. And he was old, coming in his days. What's the question?
Contemporaneously, when Bill Clinton was elected president, he looked so young. He had his hair dyed salt and pepper, so he'd have a more distinguished older look. Yeah.
All right.
Oh,
Do you know what I just said? It's not deserving to be discussed on
me.
on a royal table.
I
So
apologize.
Royalty.
this interpretation is somewhat problematic because both an elderly appearance and chronological age are ostensibly superficial qualities. Why were they singled out as expression of the greatness of Abraham, our patriarch? If you tell me old and coming in his days, it's just about the way he looked, right? And that is the years of his life, the days of his life. It's an external expression. Who cares about that? Why is the Torah wants to express the greatness of Abraham using the fact that he looked old for his age? Abraham possessed singular uniqueness. That is, in a world of idolaters, he was the only one who worshipped one God. It was he who began to illuminate, spreading godly light throughout the world. Abraham ushered in a new epoch in the world's spiritual history, the 2 millennia of Torah. Abraham started the 2 millennia of Torah. Those of us who have been to discussion, we had this discussion about first 2 millennia was chaos, second 2 millennia is our Torah. We studied it 2 weeks ago, I believe. By teaching and disseminating Torah, why then did the Torah choose to associate his uniqueness with chronological age and an elderly appearance? The fact that the Torah nevertheless does make such an association indicates that there is, and indeed, something about the two qualities of old and advanced in years that express the uniqueness of Abraham's greatness. There must be something much deeper than being old and coming in its age. They were created, our sages have offered interpretations for both the terms of Torah uses, for both the terms the Torah uses, Zaken, old, and Baba Yamim, advanced in years. Zaken is interpreted as Zeh shekana chokhmah, one who is acquired wisdom. Baba Yamim is interpreted as meaning he comes with all his days. That is, there was not a single day in which Abraham did not observe mitzvot. This refers to, of course, the mitzvot that they existed before the giving of the Torah. So again, it says that our sages tell us Zaken comes, the word old in Hebrew is Zaken. What does Zaken make? It's actually broken from three separate words. Zeh shekana chokhmah, someone who acquired wisdom, because Abraham was a very wise man. Baba Yamim, coming with his days, meaning that every day he collected as a positive day, because in every day there was good deeds, mitzvot that he performed. Therefore, it's not about the external appearance, but it's all about his behavior, his wisdom, and the fact that he did not waste not one day in his life. Thus, these two characteristics refer to two distinct spiritual qualities. Zaken refer to the perfection of Abraham's soul, that his soul acquired wisdom. Baba Yamim refers to what he accomplished with his days, that he filled each day with mitzvot. In other words, Zaken is talking about his neshama acquiring wisdom. Baba Yamim refers to what he accomplished in this universe. He changed the universe because he continued serving God and impacting his surrounding. The intent is not merely that Abraham performed many mitzvot, but to indicate that each of his days was filled with mitzvot, where the purpose only to say that mitzvot contributed to his personal development, it would have not make any difference whether he had fulfilled these mitzvot during every one of his days, or he had performed the same number of mitzvot on one day. For with regards to the effect these mitzvot had on his soul, the same total amount of mitzvot are involved. In other words, if I could fulfill 100 mitzvot over 100 days or 100 mitzvot over 2 days, it doesn't matter, because the connection with God is established. Therefore, one must say that the attribute of Baba Yamim refers to what the person accomplishes during each of his days. In other words, God gave you days and he wants them to be filled. So it's not about his soul elevation and connection to God, but rather his accomplishment and achievements in the universe. That is within the framework of time. Therefore, The Medrash clarifies that each day was filled with mitzvot. So now we understand how he elevated his soul by being Zaken, a wise man, and how he changed the universe, and he accomplished in this universe by doing Yamim, making sure every day he did good. Fundamentally, the difference between the Torah and its mitzvot is, because wisdom goes to study of Torah, mitzvot is Yamim, is doing mitzvot around the universe, that the Torah is God's wisdom, an intellect and spiritual entity. When a Jew studies the Torah, he refines his mind and adds to his spiritual fulfillment. Mitzvot, by contrast, are enclosed in material existence. Their performance is not intended primarily for the development of a person's soul, but rather to illuminate the material dimensions of the world at large, and in this way transform it into a dwelling for God. So you have two aspects of our connection to God. One connection is to the study of Torah. What happens when we study Torah? We acquire godliness internally. We become masters of Torah. We know Torah, we study Torah, we connect to God. So it's about our personal growth. Mitzvot, you put on tefillin, you give tzedakah, you keep kosher, you celebrate Shabbat. What you do is you change the universe. That's why the mitzvot can be performed only with physical objects. Most of them are action. Even the speech and thought are connected to action, because the words doing prayer is also action, moving of the lips. In other words, you serve God. The mitzvot are there to affect the universe, to change and make the universe a holy dwelling for God. So you understand that, Ali?
Yes.
One is more of an external, the other is an internal gain or accomplishing the change in the universe. So therefore, when speaking about wisdom, that is the Torah, our sages use the expression one who has acquired wisdom, focusing on the person's spiritual attainment. The intent is to underscore that the person brought the Torah's wisdom into his soul. He acquired, he brought it to himself. When, however, the Torah speaks about the performance of mitzvot, it uses the expression of Yamim, implying that the person's energy is directed outward. Through his observance of mitzvot, he refines the world, and this involves the passage of time, a fundamental aspect of our material realm, as indicated by the expression advance in years. In other words, when we talked about mitzvot, it's about spreading out and reaching out to the universe and making the universe a holier one. Therefore, it must be done in time, interacting with time. And that's why it's important to do it every day. Yamim, not one shot where I change the entire universe. It's not as valued as if I use all the time in the world that God gave me. So if God gave me so much time, I make sure each one of those units of time is filled with positive and good. So again, Torah is internal, inward. Mitzvot is external.
Torah is for the soul,
Mitzvot is for the universe, right? Both of them are serving God, but each one is a whole different dimension. There is another point underscored by the use of the expression involving time. Time implies change. True. There are some material entities which remain unchanged. For example, the heavenly bodies, the sun and the stars, which are as strong as they were on the day they were created. Even on earth, these are entities that have been endowed with a measure of eternality. That is, the sanctuary, the ark, and the anointed oil made by Moshe are everlasting. Although presently they are not entombed, they will emerge again in the era of redemption. So there are certain objects where God created and they will stay forever. One that we can see is the sun, moon, and stars, but they have nothing to do with us. They are as powerful as the day they were created. But there are things we created. Human being created the anointing oil, the menorah, human beings' involvement. And the Torah tells us that they are around the universe throughout history. We don't know where they are, that's fine. But when Mashiach will come, we'll find the anointing oil, we'll find the menorah, and the ark, and the Ten Commandments. God's principal intent, however, is that a dwelling for him be established in this material world within the lower aspects of the physical realm. That is, those aspects subject to the change wrought by time. This is implied by the expression advance in years. Abraham walked with his years. those aspects of material existence that undergo change over time. So again, there is another dimension to the coming in days to tell us that Abraham was involved in changes. He continuously spread and expressed godliness in the universe as time was going by, meaning as changes was taking place. The Torah, on the other hand, doesn't change. When someone acquires God's wisdom, it's the same that was 3,000 years ago and today. Based on the above, we can understand how unique it was that Abraham's chronological age paralleled these advancements in years. The implication is that his personal development and fulfillment, Zaken, was thoroughly coupled with his achievements in this world, Baba Yamim. These are two very different and to a certain degree opposite thrusts, and not everyone is able to combine them. Now you can understand the uniqueness of the feature of Abraham. He was Zaken referring acquiring Torah where it's above time, and at the same time, Baba Yamim. He was changing with the time, expressing godliness in the universe, despite all the changes. Now, some people are all about wisdom. They want to study Torah all day. Some people are out there, they need to interact with people and affect people and change the universe in a positive way. But these are two distinct personalities. Abraham combined both. For example, based on the above, we can understand how unique it was that Abraham's chronological age, we studied it? For example, the text Magid Meisharim relates that Rav Yosef Karo, the codifier of Code of Law, was told that he had merited to die as a martyr, however, and to be burnt on Kiddush Hashem for God's sanctification, for the sanctification of God's name. Afterwards, however, because of an incidental factor, he was actually not granted his opportunity. Understandably, let's see if we can explain that. Understandably, had he died martyr death, he would have reached the peak of his personal spiritual development, Zaken. However, he would not have been able to compose the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Law, the text which serves as the guidelines for Jewish law, for all Jewish people, Sephardic, Ashkenazic, everybody follows Code of Law. And the virtue of composing the text would have been given to another individual. In actuality, however, Rav Yosef Karo did author the Shulchan Aruch. He thereby made a contribution to the world at large, Baba Yamim, but achieved this at the expense of having martyrdom withheld from him. For himself, his personal spiritual development would have been crowned by such self-sacrifice, and for this reason, being denied that was considered a punishment. Did you understand that? It will bring more questions and answers, but I remember I heard that from the Rebbe. The Rebbe explains the following. It's known, the Rabbi Yosef Karo lived in the 16th century in Sfat, in the Mekubalim. He's the one that we have the Code of Law, Shulchan Aruch, Beit Yosef. Beit Yosef is the house of Yosef, Yosef Karo. There is a saying, there is a tradition that goes on, that he was supposed to die for sanctifying God's name in great pain and suffering. Due to a misbehaving, which for him is misbehaving, for us it would be a great mitzvah, but he didn't do something that a person his stature should have, he was punished, that it was taken away from him. Instead, he was granted to write the Code of Law that the entire Jewish people follow today. In other words, Rambam was then. Now it's Beit Yosef. Beit Yosef proceeds, is overpower Rambam in most of the cases, because it was written 500 years later.
You disagree a lot?
Says the Rabbi. No, but there are disagreements. Says the Rabbi, and you have Magen Avraham. You have Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserlish, a young man, and he is the Ashkenazic. So anytime he disagrees with Beit Yosef, Ashkenazic follow the Ramah, Sfaradim follow Beit Yosef. But what's the point is, this says the Rabbi, to die sanctifying God is the utmost, ultimate way of serving God. And that was granted him. As soon as he was punished, he was able to be granted the gift of teaching the entire Jewish people. But these are two distinct qualities. One is to reach out to the entire community. The other one is personal growth. You can't have both. That's why he was given one or the other. In Abraham's instance, however, there was no such dichotomy.
He had both.
He possessed the quintessence of both virtues, his personal attainment and his achievements in spreading godly light in the world were perfectly coupled. For this reason, the Medrash singled out Abraham as the one who began illuminating the world. That's the uniqueness of Abraham. He had both personal growth as well as external. The above also enables us to understand the statement of our sages that Abraham's divine service began the 2 millennia of Torah, as reflected in the expression, the deeds of the patriarchs are a sign for their descendants. The divine service of the patriarch, and particularly of Abraham, the first of the patriarchs, prepared the world for the giving of the Torah. And the rabbi, I'm sure, is going to talk about the idea that the Torah that we got on Mount Sinai has both. You study to refine yourself, but you also have the obligation to change the world. Abraham is the first one who did it, and therefore is Zaken, Baba Yamim, wisdom as well as affecting the universe. And he is the one who began the 2 millennia of Torah. So God gave us the Torah 400 years later after Abraham, but the Torah has the power to do both. Now, let's see if we can find the answer to Sarah. Now, I'm going to page 219, number 10. On this basis, we can comprehend the wording of our sages' statement, just as they are perfect, so too their years are perfect. And also understand the advantage that Mimim, the perfect, have over Tzadikim, the righteous. Even a person whose divine service is focused on one thrust alone can be described as righteous, as mentioned previously with regard to the righteous men who lived during the 2 millennia of Tohu. Perfection, by contrast, implies completeness, that the person's divine service is multifaceted, combining both directions of divine service, following in the footsteps of Abraham, who initiated the 2 millennia of Torah. On this basis, we can understand. In other words, the rabbi is talking about two types of people. There is righteousness, righteous people who are choosing only one of the two lines of the two behavior, and perfect people. A perfect person is after the Torah was given, that you can combine both. On this basis, we can understand the statement, just as they, the righteous, are perfect, their years are also perfect. Just as their own divine service is perfect, unifying two opposite tendencies, so too their years are perfect, that is, the changes they undergo are perfect. They are able to bring about spiritual perfection, even in the lowest matters that are subject to change, making them also perfect. And for this reason, our sages described Sarah at the time of her death as perfect. It was Abraham and Sarah who began the preparation of the giving of the Torah, beginning a new era, the 2 millennia of Torah, and they blazed the path for the Torah that is perfect, which involves the unity of this and synthesis of these two opposite thrusts. Now we can understand Sarah, her deeds are righteous, her deeds are perfect, and the years are perfect. The idea of perfect meaning that in time, as time changes, they remain perfect and affecting the universe. So not only perfect personally wise, they became very unique in their closeness to God, serving God and studying the Torah, but also affecting the universe. And that's so unique about Abraham and Sarah. So it's not because Sarah died abruptly early, as Ali was asking, it doesn't make sense. And the Rebbe pointed out, she's different than all the righteous men, therefore it's not an example. The Rebbe's idea is, Sarah and Abraham began the 2 millennia of Torah, where you can combine the two. You can be internally perfect by acquiring, studying Torah, and outwardly, you can also change every day of your life. And that's the idea of Sarah, as the Medrash said. She's the example because she died before Abraham. And therefore, she was perfect, not only internally, personally, but in her days and years. Meaning in her days and years, not just that every day she did something well, but also that she affected the universe despite the changes of time that every day brings about. They still remain steadfast in their connection to God by spreading and reaching out to people. Does that help? Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll stop right here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Sure.